Hey friends, welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make bread. This is not like a fancy sourdough. This is a simple loaf bread, and we're going to be using just a few key ingredients. So I took this recipe and adapted it, but the basic recipe I got is on jovialfoods.com, and I can link to that. But here's what we're going to need. We're going to need einkorn flour. So this is einkorn flour from Jovial Foods, and I'm just going to talk for a quick second on why I switched to using this as my main flour. So regular flour, just regular white processed flour, does not love me. I feel like this after I've had something with gluten. That's how I feel. I feel totally like brain fog and bloated and the whole deal. So I was using a Bob's Red Mill 1-for-1 flour. Now that does work. It has a different texture though. And actually one of the things that I have not loved about just regular all-purpose flour is that it tastes like cardboard. It just doesn't have any taste to it. And I know that flour, like you use it to bake bread and do other stuff with, so you aren't eating the flour directly, but I've still always thought that it's just a little bland. Well, I got hooked on someone's YouTube channel where they're talking about how to make bread, and she kept going on and on about einkorn flour. And then I noticed other people who talk about einkorn flour, they keep going on and on about einkorn flour. So what is this magical einkorn flour? And it is the only ancient grain flour that has not been adulterated by humans. So it hasn't been processed in a way, has been like genetically modified or anything like that. And actually the story is really fascinating. You can go to jovialfoods.com to find out the story about how they kind of brought this flour back to life. It was extinct and they brought it back to life. So you can hear the whole story there. So the first thing I want you to know, I keep my flour in one of these because I think it's easier to dish out that way. So the first thing I want to show you is it's not white. It's kind of a golden color. So it has a different taste. It has a different texture. It's a little bit more crumbly than your white all-purpose flour. I found that I don't get the crumbliness with this recipe too much though. So, but again, this is like any homemade bread. What ends up happening is, like if your kid wants a grilled cheese, or maybe you want a grilled cheese, we're going to end up doing is cutting it a little bit thicker, and I think it tastes delicious that way. So one of the reasons why I wanted to show you guys how to make bread is right now, since food prices have been on the rise, it has been really important for me to learn how to cook some of these staples at home. Now, my mother was this gourmet home chef and taught me all of the things. She taught me how to bake bread. She taught me how to do jam, do canning, all of those things. And I remember in my 20s going, when am I ever going to need to do this? Mom, I'm just going to go to bread and go to the grocery store, and bread's like $1.50 a loaf. Why would I ever need this skill? Well, inflation. Okay, inflation is a thing. And what I've noticed at the grocery store is that bread, you get bread at the grocery store, and in my house, it lasts about 5 days to a week, and then it gets moldy. Or if you have it in the fridge, if it doesn't get moldy, it gets kind of weird and stale. And I don't like that. And so I'd rather bake fresh bread at home. So I've been experimenting with this einkorn flour and teaching myself how to bake bread. In addition to doing, sweet Jesus, I did an old school sourdough starter, and I've been making focaccia, which if you have never had focaccia in your entire life, it is like Italian bread, and it's the best thing in the entire world. And you can dip it in your olive oil and balsamic vinegar. So, but today we're just going over basic loaf bread. You will need a loaf pan for this. And I like to use, I have this Pyrex glass bowl. This is my favorite for baking any kind of bread because you could see from the outside it has risen. Today is really hot. It's going to be about 102 today. And what I found is on days like today, when it's going to be really hot, two things happen. One, your bread's gonna rise. And two, sometimes if you need it to be more of a stiffer loaf, or a loaf that has a little certain type of shape like sourdough, it can be really hard to work with. Since we're doing just a plain loaf, I don't think it'll be that big of a deal, but I just thought I'd bring it up because, hey, it's summer. So we need dry active yeast for this, water, our einkorn flour, and water, yeast, flour, salt. We're gonna do about a teaspoon and a half of sea salt. They say sea salt, but I really like Redmond salt. So go for that. And you can add in some honey too. Some honey. So if you want more like the honey wheat kind of loaf taste, put in a tablespoon of honey in your bread and bread mixture. And I recently did this with sourdough, and it really had less of a bite than sourdough normally does. So I'm trying that today with my regular loaf of bread. So that's it. What we're gonna do is we're gonna combine the water and the yeast, and keep in mind, salt is in this recipe. Salt and yeast don't like each other. They're not friends, and salt will actually kill your yeast if you add salt and yeast together and then start that way. So we're going to do the yeast first, get that happy, and we are going to let that get dissolved in the water, and then add in our flour and our salt and our honey. So we're going to let that rise for like 30 minutes. We're going to do some stuff. We're going to let it rise again, and then we're going to bake it. So this does not take a whole lot of time. So let's get going on our bread. You will be amazed at how good this loaf is. And when you think about how much all of the ingredients cost, it's cheaper to get it at home, and it's way fresher. So let's get going.
Okay, we're going to start out with our dry active yeast. We just need to activate this. The yeast is what's going to allow our dough to rise. So we're just going to add our yeast and our water here and break up the yeast a little bit, and we are going to let it get happy for about 15 minutes. All right, now we're going to add our flour. In addition to our flour, we're going to add some salt. And I also am going to try to do a little honey wheat kind of action thing here. And I'm adding a teaspoon of honey as well. The trick here is to put some olive oil in your spoon first, and then the honey doesn't stick. And we are going to mix this thing up. And just a note about einkorn flour, it's going to look dry. It's going to look like there's not enough liquid. Do not add more liquid. It takes a hot minute for the liquid to be absorbed. So we're going to let this take a little nap, cover it with saran wrap and maybe a towel, and we'll see it in a minute.
Okay, friends, so we're letting our dough rest, okay? And my one recommendation is, if it's super warm, like today is super warm for me, maybe you very gently put saran wrap over the top at the end, and then you keep an eye on it. This was my last experience making this recipe, is that the dough rose so fast before I realized it. Like, I'm here in the kitchen doing other stuff, and I turn around, it's been 30 minutes, and the dough stuck to the saran wrap. And so you can either spray your saran wrap with some olive oil, or you can just, if you see that it's rising rapidly, you can just take the top off. So just keep it as simple as possible for you, whatever that means. But you're going to want to watch it just while you're doing things around the house. And then we're going to throw it into the oven, and you'll see how amazing this bread is.
All right, we're going to uncover our bread. And what you should be looking for is bubbles. And you'll see I'll point out a few bubbles. And it should have visibly risen a little bit. With einkorn flour, you're not going to get like double the rise or triple the rise of the original dough, but it will have visibly risen. Now make sure you cover your spatula with olive oil. I forgot to do this, and so it sticks. But we just want to pat down the dough a little bit, and we're going to put it into a prepared loaf pan. You can see there's already some. I use olive oil instead of having a spray that's an entirely different thing in my kitchen. So I just add a little bit of olive oil in there, and we're going to dump all this glorious dough right into the loaf pan. And again, we're going to pat pat it a little bit. We're just going to smush it, if that's the word, smush it a little bit. We are not looking for, like, remember, I don't know if your mother was really aggressive with dough like mine was. Oh, you have to punch it down. No, we're just going to pat it down a little bit. We're going to make sure that the top is smooth. We're going to make sure that there aren't any lumps in there. And we're just going to pat it down a little bit. And you see, I'm also getting the corners to make sure it's all even. Easy peasy. This is not difficult, but it just takes a minute. So we're going to pat it down, and then what we're going to do is cover it in saran wrap and let it rise for another 30 minutes or so. See, now it's all ready to go. Put your saran wrap on and just watch the rise. Watch how fast it rises, because you don't want it to stick to that saran wrap. And I put mine on the counter or sometimes on the stove. You'll see now it's ready to go into the oven. You'll see it will have visibly risen a little bit. There's a few little bubbles on top, and you are good to go. Throw that bad boy in the oven. And that's it, you guys. You made bread. How easy peasy is that? So if you maybe live a ways from the grocery store, or you're worried about food inflation or any of that, I want you to consider making your own bread. This is super easy. Now, I did let it cool for a couple minutes, and then we're just going to dump it out. And because I did oil the pan well, it will just come right out. This loaf will be probably moist for a little bit. Let it cool. But here I couldn't wait, and I cut a piece, and I have my homemade peach jam. And you're like, Victoria, but it looks kind of brown. It's homemade, people. Okay, there's no preservatives. And I don't know if you like the end of the loaf. My husband and I refer to it lovingly as the butt. I love the butt of the loaf because you get that good crusty, almost, it's like a little crunchy. So try homemade jam with this sucker. Oh my God. Or PB&J. Amazing. Now you go try to make your own loaf. Okay.
All right, friends. So that's it. Like, that's all that's to this recipe. And I hope this inspires you to give bread making a try. This is not terribly complicated. All we're doing is using yeast. And this year, getting back to baking bread and things with yeast, I was terribly intimidated, but I had to remind myself, like, this is dry active yeast. This is not a starter, like sourdough starters. Like, things rise on their own time is what I figured out with my starter. And with dry active yeast, the whole point is it's gonna rise. And so everybody just calm down. It's gonna end up great. And just try it, just experiment with it and see how it turns out for you. Let me know in the comments what you think of this recipe, and if you have made your own bread in the past. Let me know if you like the einkorn flour. I am totally obsessed with it. All right, you guys, I'll see you in the next video. Make sure you push all the buttons, subscribe, like, do all the things, and I will see you soon. Okay, guys, I hope you love this recipe. And if you could see behind me in my messy kitchen counter, because like real people live here, okay, real people live here. So you'll see how much flour I have behind me. So in the world of impending food shortages and not being able to get things like flour, I decided to order in bulk. Here's what I want you to know. So I have 5 of this size, so it's a 2-pound bag behind me, and then I have another 5 in my freezer that are getting ready to be vacuum sealed. You can vacuum seal flour. I just saw something on YouTube where you can flour. You can put flour up for long-term storage. If that's something that you're thinking about, that you're even thinking about, I have my link to Azure Standard below. So far, it's been the best pricing that I've found. You can also get jovial flour directly through jovialfoods.com. And when they have their 10-pound packages, what I found is they'll run specials occasionally, and when it's 20% off or whatever, that's when I'll stock up there. But on the whole, Azure Standard has the best price for jovial flour, so it's a little bit different than a grocery store. Like, you have to go pick it up. It's a thing. It's one day a month, and the people in my area, we go meet the truck and we unload the truck and everyone picks up their goods. So it's a little bit different. If you're up for it and it's, you know, it's cheaper than getting it on Amazon and that's what you want, it's an option for you. All right, friends, thanks so much for hanging out with me today. Let me know how you like this bread recipe and I will see you soon.